why doesn't medication work for everyone, and how do you distinguish that from someone who may be abusing the medication?
Great question. So, first, let's attack the first question. So, why doesn't the medications work for everybody? So, the answer to that is monoamine oxidase theory. So, monoamine oxidase theory states that depression and anxiety really are the result of imbalance of neurotransmitters in your brain. So there were many studies where they took a bunch of individuals and they looked at the relative amounts of neurotransmitters throughout their brain. And these major neurotransmitters include like serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine. And they looked at a lot of these. And what they found is that people with depression, a lot of them had low amounts of serotonin. So that's where the antidepressants, SSRIs, come in, the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. These medications are pointed at increasing the amount of serotonin in your brain. So that works for some. But then what they also found out was that people who were diagnosed with depression had fine normal levels of serotonin, but their norepinephrine was down. So serotonin was okay, dopamine was okay, but norepinephrine was down. So these individuals wouldn't benefit from SSRIs, which increase serotonin. These individuals would benefit from a type of medication called SNRIs, selective norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. So if you give somebody that has an SSRI, who has low amounts of norepinephrine, you give them an SSRI, it's not going to help. But if you give somebody who has low amounts of norepinephrine and you give them a drug that is aimed at increasing amounts of norepinephrine, that will be helpful. Now, monoamine oxidase theory isn't that clear either because it shows relative differences. For example, someone might have low serotonin, another person might have low norepinephrine, but another person might have low serotonin and low norepinephrine. So, it really depends. It really depends per the individual. It has been proven that mental illnesses change the way that your brain works. For example, like depression will rewire your brain. PTSD, my research after that I spent several years researching on was the way that PTSD alters neural connectivity in combat veterans returning from Iraq and Afghanistan. What I discovered was that having the diagnosis of PTSD physically altered the way that different parts of the brain communicated with each other.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's not just a perception, right? So having depression, having anxiety, having PTSD is really like a pathological. It's really something that is an imbalance in your brain. It's not just the way that you change. You feel like, oh, I just need to get happier, right? I just need to do this. No, there really is a science behind it. And the level of neurotransmitters and the way that your brain's communicating with different parts of your brain is altered. So these medications, there's a whole way of approaching of how to treat these things, these different ways. And we have to find that, but the hard part is really understanding, what's wrong with this particular individual's pathology, right? Or physiology. And then finding the treatment that is best geared towards fixing that problem, right? So if I give a Phillips screwdriver for a flathead, it's not going to help.
So I think this is the most beautiful part about being human, is that we all have our own crazy chemical imbalances in our brains. Some people feel more depressed, some people feel more anxiety, some people feel have different levels of serotonin to the epinephrine. And what I want to tell you is that it's okay to not be okay, like you thinking that you need to be happier or you need to feel this way or feel that way. It's truly a chemical imbalance in your brain. It's something that has a physical toll in your mind that you sometimes don't even have full control of. So when you are going through depressive episodes and anxious episodes, that these things are not it's not like they're supposed to be normal and that we all have this and we all have that. No, it's your brain going through its levels of rewiring that it knows how to protect itself or how to feel or maybe not how it's supposed to feel. So don't think that, hey, I'm feeling depressed today because of this or that. It truly could be just a chemical imbalance of where you woke up in the morning, right, Cheyenne? Like,
Yeah, like I mean, I think it definitely like clears up the stigma that a lot of people have where mental illnesses and depression and anxiety, they're all just kind of like in your head, like
You just get
not
better,
yeah.
man.
yeah,
Like it's mostly just biochemistry and sometimes we can't help it. And so everything that he's saying is like these are the things that people use to actually help like their chemical imbalances in their head to help with the depression, to help with the anxiety, you know?
In that case, there's no other way to do it.
Yeah.
Like you need to get that help.
yeah. And so that's something that we are really glad for you, the listener and viewer, to understand. And we'll get on to the next question.
So the next thing we asked was during the rewiring of the brain, certain mental illnesses can really change how you think, how you feel, changing several emotions and how you address people. It seems like as you go through life with different mental illnesses, the brain rewires itself. Does the medication help the rewiring? Can you go back to what and who you were before the mental illness?
So if you were diagnosed with depression, right? So the rewiring in your brain has changed. So the goal of medications, and it doesn't necessarily just have to be medication. It's also cognitive behavioral therapy, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy looks at the way that your thoughts and behaviors are associated with each other. And then what it looks to do is to disconnect those behaviors without the use of medications. So both ways look at the way of rewiring your brain back to more of what it was prior to this illnesses develop. But remember, these illnesses developing isn't like a flip of a switch, right? Like it's not like, today you're normal, tomorrow you're abnormal. It's consistently just driving away over a significant period of time that eventually leads you down this path. And you're like, oh my God, how did I end up here? Right. So these medications aim and cognitive behavioral therapy aims at going back to normal physiology levels of specifically like neurotransmitters and rewiring your brain to be more connected to the areas which it used to be. Now, how do people abuse their medications? Well, it really depends on what medications you're referring to. So, for example, antidepressants such as SSRIs and SNRIs, it's very difficult to abuse those. Anything that I've seen within the medical field of SSRIs and SNRIs being taken extensively were due to individuals attempting to end their own life. They've taken a lot of, it was a suicide attempt. They wanted to overdose on drugs. So they reached for their antidepressants or medications. Fortunately, these medications, we can be countered in the emergency setting, but these medications aren't ones that normally typically get abused. Medications that typically get abused are medications that create instant relief or they create euphoric effects. And individuals begin associating the use of this medication to a relief from their previous state. And if I take more, then I'll have more of a greater relief than my previous state. So one example of medications that can get abused is anxiolytics. So for example, panic disorder, when you start having a panic attack, you reach for some type of anxiolytic. Sometimes this commonly is something like a benzodiazepine that you take that its onset is literally minutes, and it will suppress any type of anxious drive and really calm you almost immediately. So this is a quick, gratification relief that you get from this medication. So people see that as a way of, hey, if this provided me with some relief, maybe if I take more, I won't ever have this again. Or maybe if I take more, this is the only way that I see what normal looks like. So that it's kind of like habit forming. You know what I mean? It begins this habit where, this helped me before, so one helped me before, so maybe two will help me even more, or maybe three will even help me even more, or maybe I have to be in this state to just not even feel like that anymore. And that's how addiction gets to be created.
So where he expresses the thoughts of rewiring is extremely important, because as our brain goes through different phases of life and scenarios, your brain continuously rewires itself to make sure that it continuously find, whether it's new information, whether it's new scenarios, whether it's new experiences, whether it's something, it just continuously goes into this motion of rewiring. And when you go through these depressive episodes and panic attacks, your brain rewires itself to make sure that it's prepared for different situations, and also it tries to understand and help to really figure out what's going on. Will, did you feel any rewiring during your process of taking the medication?
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I was on like panic attack type anxiety medication, and so I can really see why, and I can understand why that it can be taken very abusively. At the time, like, it all kind of goes full circle. At the time, um, like yeah, as a kid, like you're not given like something as severe as Xanax, right? But you're still
Right.
given some type of like something Zapine, like that's usually what people look for when they're treating anxiety. Something I don't know, I just don't know what those medications specifically are called, but it's just meant to calm you down, stop your thoughts process. Pretty much, it's just blunt. It's meant to sedate you basically, and that's fine. It doesn't last like the entire day, right? It's just when you're having this onset of a panic attack. You would take it, or I would take it. It would 5 minutes, and it's fine. Like it really helps. And there were times where like they say, okay, like over time, if you were taking something like that every other day, to which I was, the medication doesn't necessarily stop working, but the effect, like the first time you take a medication like that, it really hits you. Like you know it's working, you know for sure it's working, and not that you get used to those effects, or it's either you get used to it, or like he said, the effects kind of like come down because you're still taking the same dose. As you keep taking something, you need to up the dose to feel the same effects. It's kind of like that people say about the first high, like you're always chasing that first high
Right.
that people deal with. And there were times where, okay, like to my therapist, if the panic attack was bad enough, take two of those, but really try not to do it. And there were only maybe like one or two instances where I ever had to do that. But when I did have to do that, I can definitely see why those are taken abusively, and why they're prone to do it, because you feel really good. It really helps. It doesn't just like blunt your feelings, but it adds more dopamine and serotonin into your brain, and it's that high feeling that I assume people are chasing.
It's the euphoric effect is what
Yeah.
I keep coming back to. What think is the biggest issue when it does come to those kind of medications that have those kind of effects to help you. They need to go through the euphoric effect. That euphoric effect helps you feel a lot better. But also the euphoric effect is what you started chasing, and where the addiction slowly goes, where it slowly starts beginning. And we're going to start getting more into the addiction side of the episode as we slowly enter into the next couple of questions.